Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the NoDQ.com live recap of Monday Night Raw for January 13th, 2025, the second episode of Monday Night Raw on Netflix. Shout out to everybody watching, whether it's live or on demand. Thank you so much for your viewership and support. Let's get right into this Raw recap. As City by the Bay points out, it's Monday Night Rift. There you go. I like it. We had some drones coming into the arena for the intro of Raw, which I thought was really cool. I like the drones a lot. Maybe only two issues. Number one is they need to work on the camera quality for the drones. It feels like the video quality is not quite as good as the regular cameras, but I think over time with the technology, that will improve. That's just nitpicking on my part. It still looks great. The only other issue I have with the drones is the fact that it makes some of the spots very obvious. We saw that on SmackDown when Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens were brawling on the equipment, and then they end up going through the tables below, and you could see it happening before it happens. It was very obviously telegraphed, and I think those overhead drone shots can take away the little bit of suspension of disbelief. And we'll talk more on that in just a few moments. But anyways, we had a video package highlighting the first episode of Raw on Netflix. We had CM Punk come into the ring for a promo to discuss his victory over Seth freaking Rollins. Punk gave a shout out to the firefighters in California dealing with the wildfires, and I second what CM Punk did and what he said, giving them a shout out. People in California getting hit pretty hard with those fires, not too far from where I grew up. Those fires are coming close to the San Fernando Valley, Encino, and that area. I was born and raised in the West San Fernando Valley, West Hills, Canoga Park area. So very close to home, and my thoughts to everybody out there in California. Anyways, back to Raw. CM Punk said he had a lot on his mind, but Seth Rollins is no longer on his mind. Now, you know what that means. Anytime a wrestler says that they are done with somebody, you know they're not done with that person, or that person's not done with them. CM Punk confirmed what we already knew from last week because he said it in his post-match promo, which did not make the actual Raw broadcast, but in that promo, Punk declared himself for the Royal Rumble, and he did here officially on Raw. He said that his biggest setback getting hurt last week was his biggest comeback. And he said that he sees John Cena. He's always seen John Cena. And thus, Punk is officially entering the Royal Rumble. But of course, Seth freaking Rollins interrupted. Rollins said Punk should not be surprised to see him. Rollins said that he would rather be the worst version of himself than any version of CM Punk. Rollins had this black eye, I presume from the match, and Rollins said it was the worst loss of his life, and the only way for him to seek redemption is to take CM Punk's WrestleMania dreams and flush them down the toilet. And Rollins officially declared himself for the Royal Rumble. Then we had Drew McIntyre show up. Drew McIntyre, he exchanged words with both guys. Punk and Rollins were ready to fight, but McIntyre turned them down. He said he's got a bigger problem, and that's Roman Reigns. He needs to get to the title before Roman Reigns can get to it. So Drew McIntyre officially declared for the Royal Rumble. Remember 5 years ago when R-Truth declared for the Royal Rumble and he was going to throw Paul Heyman over the top then Paul Heyman had to make it clear that Brock Lesnar was in the Rumble, not Heyman. And then R-Truth undeclared himself for the Rumble. That was an all-time great segment. Royal Rumble this year definitely stacking up with all the big names entering. I was a fan of this segment. Good stuff here to set up the Royal Rumble. Now, let's get on to Chad Gable versus the mystery opponent, the luchador. And this was no surprise. WWE even gave it away earlier today. They really gave it away last week. We could all tell weeks ago that it was for Penta. And then last week we had Penta's name. But yes, WWE put out Penta merchandise earlier today. And in a way, I like it because it built up anticipation. People already knew it was Penta, but you put out the merchandise, you get people hyped. And yeah, sure enough, it was Penta. His music was fine. Wasn't great. It was Def Rebel, but it was all right. I liked the overall presentation, though. They had the pyro for him, and they did a great job with his entrance overall. The match itself with Gable, I thought was good. Yes, it wasn't perfect, and it did seem a little bit sloppy at times. Maybe Penta with some ring rust, being out of action for so long. I believe his last actual match was like in July. So yeah, that's like a 6-month layoff. Colin Andrews sent in a $2 super chat, says, behind on Raw, Penta and Chad Gable was sloppy joes, and he does the shoulder shrugs. I still think despite that, the match was good. Chad Gable is always solid in the ring, and the fans were into it, and that's really what was important. The crowd was not quiet for this. They were into it. They were behind Penta. They were saying his catchphrase, the no fear, and I enjoyed the match for what it was. And Penta did some selling. You know, it wasn't like one of his old matches where it would just be move, 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 move. He did sell quite a bit, and then he built up his momentum, and he did his dive, of course, but you know, he hyped up the fans with it. He built up to it. So I did like the match, despite the few hiccups here and there. And on commentary, they even mentioned Lucha Underground. They mentioned TNA. They did not mention AEW, which I really wasn't expecting them to. And Colin sent in a $2 super chat about the match, saying that it was sloppy joes, and he also brought up how Penta should have squashed him. I saw a few comments about that. The only thing about that is if Penta had beaten Chad Gable in like 2 minutes, people would have complained about that. They would have said, Chad Gable signed a new contract and they're just wasting him, blah, blah, blah. I like that they actually had a nice, lengthy match so fans not familiar with Penta could see him in action. And they don't really know anything about the guy. Of course, we know the AEW fans and Lucha Underground fans and Impact fans and even WWE fans who watch other promotions. They know who he is, but there's also a lot of fans who don't know who he is. So when he comes in there, I think it was the right call to let it be a competitive match and have Penta go toe-to-toe with Chad Gable. I like that they gave them time, and it was back and forth with these two. Penta was selling the leg during the match, and eventually he was able to get the upper hand. He countered the ankle lock with the arm breaker that they were calling the sacrifice, and then he picked up the win with the Penta driver. And I actually thought the best thing about all this was the post-match. They actually gave Penta some time on the mic. He got a lot of TV time for his debut here. They didn't just throw him in a match, he wins in 2 minutes, and then we move on to the next thing. He actually got a good 20, 25 minutes of TV time between the match and his post-match promo. He thanked the fans. He called Raw his new home, WWE. He spoke in Spanish a bit, and put over the Latin American community. And he gave a shout out to his family. His kids were at ringside. One of his daughters was crying, and they kept showing her. And I thought this was really cool. This was a nice touch, gave him some personality, and his charisma really carried through in this promo, despite the broken English and speaking in Spanish. You know, you did feel his emotion, and I think he got that across to the people watching at home. So I really thought this was the best stuff, was this post-match promo, to really make you feel some emotion for the guy and get in his corner. Big debut for him. And, you know, they've been wondering for years, like, who could be the next Rey Mysterio in WWE? Could be Penta now. And what happens when Rey Fenix eventually comes in? Rey Fenix gave a shout out to Penta on social media. You can check that out over on NoDQ.com. Might be another 6 months or so, but I do think we will be seeing Rey Fenix in WWE before long. Building Nexus sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you for that, Building Nexus. I appreciate it. Building Nexus says, can't wait for Phoenix. And yes, I do think we will see Phoenix. It's just a matter of time. Obviously, his contract is just going to run out. He's sitting at home. But, hey, Penta was gone 6 months, and he came in, and he got a lot of fanfare. And I think this was 2 thumbs up. I think they nailed the debut for Penta, and looking forward to seeing how far he can go in WWE. We had, oh, by the way, they called the Canadian Destroyer the Mexican Destroyer. He did do the Mexican Destroyer during the match, so we still get those. Thankfully, it wasn't like Destroyer and then Gable pops up and gives him a Destroyer and then Penta pops up. They didn't do any of that, so thankfully none of that. We had Dominic Mysterio backstage giving flowers to Liv Morgan following Liv Morgan's loss of the Women's Championship last week to Rhea Ripley. And, you know, Dominic was unable to help Liv retain the title. Liv said she wasn't mad, but then she told Dominic to get her bags and take care of the parking, the valet. Dirty Dom is in the doghouse, as Matthew and Jerry point out in the chat room. I mentioned this on No DQ&A video. Check it out if you guys missed it. It's up on the No DQ YouTube channel, the Q&A video that I did, the live stream. I mentioned that this could be the start of a turn for Dominic Mysterio, and this might be the beginning of it now, with Liv Morgan saying she's not mad, but she's having him run all these errands for her and doing all this stuff. We'll see what happens. I could see this leading to a Dominic face turn at some point. Shout out to Hap. I didn't miss you, Hap. I just wanted to make sure I could use it as a transition between segments. Hap Connell sent in a $5 super chat. Thank you, Hap. Says, today in history in 2000, Mankind announces that there will be a substitute in his match against Triple H at the Royal Rumble, and his name is Cactus Jack. And I also mentioned this on the No DQ&A video. Triple H and Cactus Jack, one of my favorite Royal Rumble matches. Make sure you guys go back and watch that before the Royal Rumble. If you're going to do a Royal Rumble viewing or best of watch along, I say go back and check out that match. That one was an all-time classic in 2000. I love the build-up to the firing of Mankind and doing the spoofs with Midian playing the role of Mankind. Great stuff there to lead up to that match. Anyways, back to Raw. We had Sheamus versus Ludwig Kaiser in a singles match. Braun Breaker was at ringside. Good match here. I mean, these two always deliver. Always entertaining when they're in the ring. Back and forth match here. Kaiser sent Sheamus into the barricade with a drop kick and then worked him over after the break. Sheamus then gained control, did the 10 beats, did the white noise. Kaiser was able to kick out of that. And then Kaiser tried to cheat with the shillelagh, but Sheamus caught him with a knee. And then Kaiser tried to take out Sheamus with a kick, but Sheamus avoided it and then picked up the win with the bro kick. Sheamus shook hands with Pat McAfee on the outside. Braun Breaker stood up from his seat, shoved Sheamus. You had the referee keeping them apart. And it was confirmed that Sheamus will, in fact, challenge Braun Breaker for the IC title at Saturday night's main event. We got our first match confirmed for Saturday night's main event. Now, will they finally pull the trigger on Sheamus? They did mention it on commentary. Sheamus has never won the IC title. He's done it all. He's been world champion multiple times, tag team champion multiple times, United States champion multiple times, King of the Ring winner, Royal Rumble winner, Money in the Bank winner, but he's never won the IC title. Maybe they'll pull the trigger on it now. Breaker's had the title for a few months now. I don't mind if they switch back and forth a few times, since we had some long runs. In particular, Gunther had a very lengthy reign as champion. I wouldn't mind if Sheamus and Braun Breaker traded it a couple of times. Let Sheamus win the title, and then Braun Breaker could always win it back at WrestleMania or something like that. Rumble, Elimination Chamber, whenever. Yeah, I'd be cool with Sheamus winning the title at Saturday night's main event. Let him get that win and complete the Grand Slam, or whatever you want to call it. And as Fingerpot of Doom points out, make sure you check out Fingerpot of Doom. You can check out the videos over on NoDQ.com. As far as Braun Breaker goes, that could be a way to get him off the IC title storyline and move him up in the card. That's definitely a possibility as well. Maybe have them go back and forth for a couple months, and then Braun Breaker can move on to the next chapter of his career. We had the confirmation that Seth Rollins will face Drew McIntyre on next week's Raw in a WrestleMania rematch. I like that they set this up for next week's Raw. They're keeping these Raws fairly stacked on Netflix. Rollins cut a backstage promo and said he owes Drew McIntyre one from WrestleMania. And then Sami Zayn approached Seth Rollins and said he's there if Rollins needs someone to talk to. But then Rollins had to bring up how Sami Zayn helped his boy Roman Reigns win Tribal Combat last week. And Rollins wanted to know what's next. Is Sami Zayn going to help Roman Reigns win the Royal Rumble? Is Sami Zayn going to help Roman beat Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania? Or is Sami Zayn going to help himself? I liked this backstage segment because it can move Sami Zayn away from the Bloodline storyline and get him back to doing his own thing. So if that's where they're transitioning, I thought that this was an effective segment. Maybe sets up Sami Zayn to win the Royal Rumble. That ain't going to happen, but Sami Zayn's still chasing that title. And speaking of that, backstage. So here was something, maybe one of my few criticisms of Raw, because I did think overall Raw was a great show. I was a little thrown off by this. So backstage, Karrion Kross came out of Adam Pearce's locker room and told The Miz that the Wyatt Six have moved to SmackDown, which I know they're doing the transfer window, but it feels very out of nowhere. Like, I would have rather they did some kind of angle where, maybe something where the two factions are getting out of control and Adam Pearce is like, you know what? We already had them face each other. We got to get these guys away from each other. Let's make them SmackDown's problem and we'll do a trade or something. Like, I wish they had done more with this. It just felt very out of nowhere to me. Wyatt Six, they're on SmackDown now. So, yeah, that was maybe the the one or two low points of the show. And then Sami Zayn came in. He wanted to talk to Adam Pearce. And then we had an exchange between Miz and Sami Zayn. And Miz brought up how he's a two-time world champion, something that Sami Zayn hasn't even done once. And then Sami Zayn, of course, was besmirched, and he challenged The Miz to a match on Raw. I find this interesting because Sami Zayn hasn't won the world title, and now they're bringing up that he still hasn't won it. So I like the fact that they're starting to move Sami Zayn back in the direction of trying to go for the world title in WrestleMania build-up and Royal Rumble build-up. Definitely a fan of that. We had a shot of NXT champion, the new NXT champion, Obafemi, at ringside. And we had Gunther, the World Heavyweight Champion on Raw, come into the ring for a promo. He said that his championship is the only prize worth fighting for. And we had a quick interruption by Jey Uso, fresh off of his win over Drew McIntyre. And he essentially challenged Gunther to a title match at Saturday night's main event. And Gunther brought up how he already beat Jey Uso twice in a row. And he said he'll expose Jey as a guy who is a really talented tag team wrestler. And he left the ring, and Jey Uso said that, yes, he was scared to do it alone. He's still trying to earn respect, and he said he will make Gunther respect him. He will beat Gunther's ass for the championship at Saturday night's main event, and it was officially confirmed with the graphic. They're finally setting up Saturday night's main event. We got the IC title match, and now we have the World Heavyweight Championship match set for the second Saturday night's main event of the new era coming up later this month. I believe it's January 25th or 27th. I'm not sure the exact date. I think it's 25th. That Raw in Atlanta is the 27th, so it must be the 25th. January 25th, Saturday night's main event. They're finally starting to build up that card. Good segment here. Jey Uso getting the title match. I'm fine with that. He beat Drew McIntyre, so makes sense. Shout out to good old JM Jeff Meacham, who made this quick graphic for me. There you go, Monday Night Rift. For future reference. We'll have to make that a thing now. Thank you, Jeff. We had our Intercontinental Championship for the women, the final match of the tournament. Dakota Kai versus Lyra Valkyria. Bayley was at ringside for this one. And this was a good match, back and forth. Maybe a little short. I felt like for the final match of the tournament, it felt a little bit on the short side. And Matthew just pointed this out too in the chat room. One of the highlights was Lyra giving Dakota this suplex off the apron onto the floor. Looked like it could have hurt both of them. And then after the break, it was back and forth. Dakota built up some momentum, and then she hit the GTK, but Lyra was able to roll out of the ring. Dakota got Lyra back in the ring, but then Lyra recovered and picked up the win with the Nightwing to pick up the championship. They had a nice celebration for her. And yes, Ian pointed out that Michael Cole gave a shout out to China. That was nice. A nice touch from Cole. And then after the match was over, Adam Pearce came in the ring, put the title around Lyra's waist. That was a thing that Vince McMahon didn't like. He didn't like when wrestlers had the titles around their waist like a belt. They always had to have the titles around their shoulder. But Triple H era, they can put the titles around their waist. And we had the mutual respect. Dakota Kai gave Lyra a hug after the match. And then the pyro went off. We had the big celebration. Good stuff here. I just think that maybe the match should have been a little bit longer. We then had Sami Zayn versus The Miz. Basic match here, not too much to it. Miz got in your offense, and then he went for the skull-crushing finale. Sami Zayn countered, and then Sami Zayn connected with the haluva kick. And then, right after the haluva kick, he hit The Miz with the Blue Thunder Bomb and got the 1-2-3 victory. And I'm not joking. He actually won with the Blue Thunder Bomb. Granted, he hit the haluva kick first, but still. Sami Zayn, for like the second time in a year, won with the Blue Thunder Bomb. I'm always a fan of when they do that, because then you might actually think, well, maybe he will win a match with the Blue Thunder Bomb. But then, of course, I realize, well, it almost never happens, so it's probably not happening for another year or two. But I'd like to see it happen more often. I'd be fine with that being a semi-regular finisher and not just being once a year or whatever. Match was all right. It was basic. This was maybe the only match that felt like time filler on the entire show. But again, if they're setting up Sami Zayn to potentially be a world title contender, I'm definitely a fan of that. We had Rhea Ripley come into the ring to celebrate winning the championship last week against Liv Morgan. She said Monday Night Mommy was back, but then we had the quick interruption again. This time it was from Nia Jax, who I guess just showed up because we still have the transfer window. I mean, yeah, whatever. And shout out to the This Guy Experience, who sent in a $2 super chat. Thank you for that. Says Lyra is overrated, and then added the blue T-bomb finally gets the win. I did see a few people that were disappointed about Lyra winning the title. I'm fine with it. You know, she's a relative newcomer. Dakota Kai has been around for a while in WWE. Lyra was recently the NXT Women's Champion. Remember, she beat Becky Lynch. So I think she's a good wrestler. I think she has a nice presentation. I know Dakota Kai is a sentimental favorite with people, and Dakota's had her ups and downs, but I think it was fine that Lyra won, especially if they have bigger things planned for her in the future. I don't know if they're necessarily going to push Dakota Kai as like a future world champion, which is why of the two of them, I feel like Lyra might actually be the better choice, but either one of them I think would have been fine. Anyways, Rhea Ripley promo interrupted by Nia Jax, and Nia Jax is entering the Royal Rumble. She said she's going to take whatever title she wants, and then she started ripping into Bayley, who was at ringside. Remember, this show was in San Jose, Bayley's hometown, and she insulted Bayley from being from San Jose. So Bayley, like Popeye the Sailor Man, she had all she could stand. She could stand no more. She got in the ring. She confronted Nia Jax. Nia shoved her, and then Nia went at it with Rhea Ripley. Rhea fought back, and then Bayley took down Nia Jax, sent her out of the ring. Rhea Ripley and Bayley stood tall. They hugged each other, but they had the little visual there where Bayley was looking over at Rhea Ripley's championship. And Bayley has a match coming up with Tiffany Stratton, but of course we got the Royal Rumble coming up. Another good segment here. I like that they found a way to get Bayley on the show that made a little bit more sense than, oh, well, there's just a transfer window. I'm just going to show up. They actually had her at ringside to watch the match, and then she got involved. Good stuff here. And Nia got some nice heat too. The crowd was definitely booing her quite a bit. They announced for next week the New Day will finally be in action for the first time since their turn. I guess we'll see if they get new music and a new presentation. And they also announced, since the show was in Dallas, Texas, JBL is going to be on the show next week. JBL has been making appearances for TNA and various promotions, but he'll be back next week. Former world champion JBL on Monday Night Raw. We'll see what they do with that. We had our main event, Finn Bálor versus Damian Priest in a street fight. We had the video package before the match. Bálor attacked Priest from behind with a kendo stick before the match even started, but Priest fought back. They went into the crowd. They fought in the bleachers. And then there was a balcony. And here's my nitpicking about the drone. The only criticism I have of the drone was overlooking them, and you could see the two tables there. So it's like, you know they're going to do a spot through the tables. I felt like, and people are going to hate me for this, but in the Kevin Dunn era, I think they were a little bit better at not shooting things that would give away what they were going to do. So it didn't look as telegraphed or choreographed. In a way, I liked the shaky camera works, and the cuts could sometimes hide stuff like this. But when you have just a drone with one continuous shot and you see the tables there, I'm like, okay, he's putting a guy through the table. Duh. So it's nitpicking on my part. I did like this spot better, though, than the one on SmackDown with the Falcon Arrow. Damian Priest gave Bálor the Falcon Arrow off the balcony through the tables. Crowd was loving it. And then they put Finn Bálor on a stretcher. Damian Priest was like, nah, that ain't going to cut it. He took the stretcher and pushed Bálor back to the ring. But then Judgment Day got involved. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Pat McAfee, who referenced when Steve Austin beat up Bret Hart in the ambulance in 1997 on Raw. That was an all-time great segment. That's one of the reasons I love Pat McAfee so much, because he's a fan, and he references some classic WWE moments. You know, when Damian Priest does the Razor's Edge, he gives a shout out to Scott Hall with the "Hey Yo," stuff like that. I just like Pat McAfee because he's a fan and he references those classic moments, ties them into what's going on now, and it's just fun. Pat McAfee is fun. But yeah, Judgment Day got involved. JD McDonough and Carlito. Bálor came off the top with the coup de grace, but Priest was able to kick out. And then the War Raiders showed up, the tag team champions, to even the odds against Judgment Day. So it was back to one-on-one, and Bálor came off the apron, putting Priest through a table with the coup de grace on the floor, but then Priest recovered. He put Bálor through the barricade, and then he picked up Bálor, gave him the Razor's Edge through the other table that they had set up, got him back in the ring, hit the South of Heaven choke slam, and scored the 1-2-3 victory. Raw went off the air right after this, so no big cliffhanger or anything, but a really strong match to close the show. And Raw clocked in right at 2.5 hours. Triple H has gone on record saying that he thinks 2.5 hours is the perfect length of time for a wrestling show. And I have no complaints about it going a little bit shorter than 3 hours. Overall, I thought Raw was another great show. It was different from last week. Last week was more about the pomp and circumstance, more about the celebrities, and just establishing Raw on a new platform with new fans potentially. And I thought it was a great show. I know some people didn't like last week's Raw. I wasn't a fan of the stuff with The Rock. I was disappointed, but overall, I really did enjoy last week's Raw. I stand by my 9. I know some people disagree with that. I don't necessarily think this week's Raw was better, but I think it was great in its own way. I really liked how Penta's debut played out, and they set up a lot of good stuff for the Royal Rumble. And we had some great wrestling on the show too. I thought the main event was really strong. Could have been on a pay-per-view. So I'm giving Raw another 9. This was a great Raw, and to me, they're 2 for 2. 2 great Raws. Netflix era is off to a hot start, and next week could be another great show too with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre. We'll see if they can keep the streak going. 2 great Raws in a row. Netflix era, things are looking very good for the future. WrestleMania season is looking hot. Royal Rumble is looking strong. And I'm hyped up for next week. So props to WWE for another great show. Well done from everybody. And thank you all for tuning in tonight. We had a great turnout for this stream. And if you enjoyed it, please do me a favor and give this video a thumbs up on the No DQ YouTube channel. Easy URL, nodq.com/YouTube. That will take you straight to the channel. You can click on that subscribe button, turn on the notifications for all the updates. And next stop is the No DQ review, Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Check it out. And then Wednesday night, will Powerhouse Hobbs win the world title? Probably not, but I think he should. Have a great night, everyone. Stay safe out there. Take care. And say yes to NoDQ.com. I will see you all next time.